The last thing I want to look at are issues of style. And these things are not necessarily as much of the bread and butter as maybe content would be when it comes to your paper, but they're almost just as important in the fact that they can detract from what you're trying to say. They can make it confusing for your reader. Um, and really, you want your language to work for you. You want it to help you and not hurt you. So here's a couple of really common things that I see and ways to fix them that will make your writing be more concise, more clear, and more persuasive, which is always what you want with a literary analysis paper. The first thing that I like to look for are to be verbs. I've got a list of them right here. This is not an exhaustive list. This is just a few. But words that sort of fall in this category is, am, are, were, was being, had been, those kinds of verbs. They're very colorless and they're very boring. Now, obviously, being is a part of existing in this world, so we can't completely eliminate these verbs. It's nearly impossible to write without the occasional are or is. The problem is we often overuse them, and I bet a lot of you use them more than you think you do. So I want to bring it to your attention because these are words that you can actually just do a text search for and delete them. So when you're done, you can search through your text for those words and then easily find them and replace them. If your writing lacks color, spunk, and interest, I can almost guarantee you that you're overusing to be verbs. Instead, we want to replace them with stronger, more action-packed verbs. So here are some examples. My sister is loud when she is telling her children to do their homework. So we want to replace these, is loud and is telling, with something more active. So here's a more creative way to say this. My sister bellows when she tells her children to do their homework. So here's an example of using this verb, and you're just changing the tense. Instead of saying is telling, you're saying she tells. They're both in the present point of view, but this is a much more active way of saying it. And now it is parallel with the word bellows. Bellows and tells are both written in the exact same form. The next example, the restaurant's food is excellent. Is a very boring verb, so what else could we say? We could say the restaurant serves excellent food. Now this sentence is much more active and much more clear. Here's another example. You could change a noun to a verb. This is something called nominalization. Nominalization is something that really will drag down your writing, and that's when we actually make a verb a noun, but we don't want it to be that way. We want it to be active. We want it to be a verb. Let me show you what I mean. Jennifer Lawrence is the star of the Hunger Games. Now, star in this sense is used as a noun. She is the star. She is this thing. It's a thing, right? It's not a verb. What if we use this and we changed this to a verb? Jennifer Lawrence stars in the Hunger Games. Now stars is a verb, and now this is a much more active sentence. Here's another example. Our mother was the driver of the bus. Here's another very, very boring verb, was, and driver is being used as a noun. But here we could say drives or drove. So our mother drove the bus. So now we've made this sentence much more active and it's shorter and more clear. So that's always what we're going for. So I've got more examples here which you're welcome to take a look at. This one just kind of joins these choppy sentences together to make this flow more effectively. So once you know what to look for, passive constructions are easy to spot because usually passive voice uses these to be verbs, is, are, am, was, were, have been, etc. So you'll see these very often. Why was the road crossed by the chicken instead of right? Or what about the working class was marginalized? African Americans were discriminated against. Women were not treated as equals. These sentences are, perhaps true, but we're not saying them in the most specific way that we can because what they do is they raise questions. Who marginalized the working class? Who discriminated against African Americans? Who mistreated women? The answers to these questions help us add specificity and precision. When we write in the passive, we demonstrate a more thorough understanding of what you're discussing. When we write in the active is what that should say. When we write in the active, you demonstrate a more thorough and understanding of what you're discussing by being explicit in your connections. Don't make us guess, write with detail. Okay, now, vague or wordy writing. Here's how to make things more clear and concise. First, we want to delete things that say there is, there are. These are very, very boring, and do you know why? It's because they replace an active subject. So when we say there are many kinds of people in the world, this is a really vague subject, and we don't know why until we look closely. It's because there are is taking the place of a subject. So let's change that to make a subject and then an active verb. Many kinds of people, this is a noun phrase, many kinds of people, so here's our subject, exist, here's our active verb, in the world. Okay, much more eloquent sentence here. Here's another one. There were some important findings in the investigation. Okay, here's the verb, and there is not a subject. We don't have a subject, so let's add one. The investigators, okay? The investigators found, here's an example of nominalization, findings was changed to found, important clues. Now clues I added, but it makes it more specific and we kind of know exactly what we're talking about here. Another thing you can do is delete meaningless words. Just go through your text and just delete these things. Kind of, actually, very, really, basically, certain, various, virtually, generally. All those kinds of words don't mean anything. They mean nothing, so they don't add anything to your paper. Just delete them. Delete doubled words, hopes and desires, full and accurate, future plans, free gift, true facts. These things are just reiterating what we've already said, and we don't need to add them, so just delete them. Delete what readers can infer. Terrible tragedy, basic fundamentals, large in size, round in shape, honest in character. Again, these things are pretty obvious. If it was a tragedy, we can pretty much guess it was terrible, so we don't need to say it twice. Here's an example of taking things out that we don't need. Imagine someone trying to learn the rules for playing the game of chess. This is much more wordy than it needs to be. Instead, we could just say, imagine learning the rules of chess. How much easier is that? Sometimes you can just replace a phrase with a word. We always want to be more specific. Here's some examples. Throughout my life, I've had many people support and love me. Okay, who are many people? We could say, my aunt. We're talking about throughout your life, but is there a specific time? We could say, as a high school student. And how did my aunt support and love me? She worked 3 jobs to earn money for my college education. So whenever we have vagueness, we want to replace it with something specific. Here's another example of the there is, there was issue. Due to the post-World War II, due to the post-World War II, there was a boom in the economy that created opportunities which inspired the Americans to pursue their dreams. Instead, we want to say, during the post-World War II era, the economy boomed. Okay, so we moved this to the subject position, and we made this a verb. And of course, we changed this issue here too. The economy boomed, and it inspired Americans to pursue their dreams. See how much more concise this is and how much more sense it makes. I hope some of these tips have helped you. If you have more questions on style, please send me an email and I'm happy to walk through it with you.